right, Pete, I'm super fascinated with the journey of a franchisee because you had to have accomplished something incredible before you became a franchise owner. And then secondly, for you to have the mindset of investing your life savings into a business you have little to no control over seems like a fairly complex thing. So take me back to before you're a franchisee, like what even inspired you to go down the route of becoming a franchise owner?
Well, I've been working with Sola in this franchise for a long time, coming up on probably 18 years, 18 and a half years. So, and the franchise has only been around we just celebrated our 20th anniversary. So, um, essentially, I knew some of the original founders. I have been a high school teacher my career, so I have a very unusual path to getting into entrepreneurship. Um, and so I didn't originally have that kind of mindset, but I would mountain bike with my friend Todd Neal, and he would tell me about what he's doing in his work and the company before Sola, and was fascinated by that. Then they left ARC, founded Sola, and it's just a great story. They were around. Stratton used to own, I'm guessing you know the history of Sola. So Stratton used to own salons. So it just was a challenging business to own. Then they came across Salon Suites and realized that with some additional design choices, they could really solve a lot of the problems in the salon world. And they made that leap, and it was pretty wildly successful right from the get-go. I think they said they were hoping to, be full in their very first store in 6 to 12 months. And in like 30 days, they had a 20-person wait list or something. And they knew it, they had hit on something. So then they grabbed some other people that they knew, my friend Todd including, and started to develop the companies. And I was living at Denver at the time, but grew up in Indianapolis. And Todd and I talked, and we were thinking about moving back home to Indianapolis. And so as I looked for teaching jobs, I was also doing site selection for our first salon. And we joked all the time, if this doesn't work, I'm working until I'm 90. I mean, so it's quite a thing to hand over anywhere from, the first stores were probably 750,000. Now they're close to $1.5 million. And so you hand over $1.5 million, build it all out and then hope people show up. And over they have. So we just built our 8th store. So keep rolling. Like to continue to build more. And, found out I'm pretty good at this. So.
All right, a lot that I want to unpack from that. First, was there any entrepreneurial stories in your family? Was it in the DNA at all? Or was this like...
No, my mom retired 2nd grade teacher. My dad is a 5th grade teacher. I was teaching. My sister taught. My brother still teaches. So we're a family of teachers, which I think teachers are probably the least risk adverse of folks on the planet. But I have a attention to detail, and I have an electrical engineering degree, a business computer science degree, and a teaching license. So I taught in the business high school in the business realm of things. Off and on, I've taught entrepreneurship, obviously doing it's way different. But, and then I just finally retired teaching in 2019, so not that long ago. So for the longest time, I did both building stores, managing. Eventually, we hired a manager. So I did both for quite a long time.
Odd / important question. So if I think about teachers in general. So if we go a higher cost franchise, they tend to fall into like a Goddard School type model or a Primrose, one of those.
Yep.
If it's a lower investment, then you're thinking like a Sylvan Learning or a Kumon. Like that's the route that teaching, because usually passion has to align with it. And so the two side did were you beelining to this? Like, was this all you were looking at? Did you look at anything else? And then secondly, as not trying to be insensitive with the question, but teachers aren't paid very well. So how did you put together enough money to buy the first one?
So, good questions. Yeah, teachers don't tend to be, like I said, we weren't risk aversive. I didn't have a passion for hair or being a landlord. It was all based on, and I think really a lot of people do franchising this way. It's all through networking of friends. So you see success. Um, I used to show a documentary in my classes about Dunkin' Donut franchises, and on the East Coast, heavily owned by East Asian communities, and it's because they get their friends involved in Dunkin',
Right.
because they see the success of it, and then they bring along their friends. And I think a lot of franchises work the same way. So, and so that's how I got involved. Then you've got the how did we fund it? And I used to teach this a lot with my students. I'm always a guy that paid extra on my mortgage, and our biggest asset is our homes usually. So we had, and we lived in Colorado, where back in the day, building equity in your homes is pretty easy to do because the home prices. We bought our, first house for I think 58,000, and then 3 years later sold it to 145,000. So you can build equity in a house super fast. So I took out a second mortgage. My partner took out a second mortgage, and then he had extra funds available, so he kind of funded the rest. So we just did it out of pocket. If people aren't familiar with entrepreneurship, you typically can't get a loan from the bank straight out of the gate. You need to be established for 3+ years. Banks tend to not loan people money unless they don't need it. So finding, it's usually friends and family. And then second mortgage is probably the most popular way, I think, to fund businesses.
So I understand where the financing comes from. Probably the more complex currency is emotional currency. And if you're risk averse, like, what's going on in your gut and your head and your heart when you're going through this process of second mortgage? And like, was that hard for you?
No, I have, I think it's really years of being in the classroom of nothing really triggers me. And so when you're teaching, and I taught inner city for a lot of years, number one rule is to never elevate the emotional level of whatever's going on. So, if somebody's acting up, if you elevate your emotional level, then they're going to match that and you're off to the races. So I'm really pretty unflappable. It's kind of amazing. We've been through some crises, floods and all sorts of stuff. And I just move into problem solve mode and away I go. So it doesn't affect me, I guess. So
I think that's a tremendous insight. Now, obviously, you have to connect the financial side back to the mentality, but educators in general, if you have to learn how to stay even, and that's a skill set that's important to be an educator, then maybe educators, like, and of course, there's no study on this. Like, if you look at the backdrop of, are former teachers the greatest entrepreneurs that ever existed, or the best at small business that ever existed? I mean, it's an interesting thought.
Yeah. It's, you do have to be pretty unflappable. You have to be comfortable with some level of chaos and uncomfortable. It's like herding cats, which a lot of entrepreneurship is.
Mhm.
And then I do have um, an attention to detail that's quite helpful. So, I'm familiar. I'm good with finances. I'm good with the bookkeeping. Which is when I taught it to my students, that was the least exciting part for them. They hated trying to go through the books. But my big goal teaching it was, in most businesses, calculate you can calculate your risk pretty easily ahead of time. So there was Scott Wise is a local entrepreneur that owned restaurants, and he would come in. I had a lot of guys come in and talk to my classes. So he came in, and it was funny. The week he came in, he was selling his business for $20 million. So very successful. But he's like, yeah, I see a spot. I know the lease rates. I know how much it is to build out with square footage. I know how many tables I've got. I know I can do one turn at lunch. I can do 2 turns at dinner. And I know my price points. Before I sign a lease, I know if I can make money.
I mean, I think it's important to also call out what you're talking about, even in your teaching style. And I would imagine most educators follow this, is you're following a system too, because there's a curriculum or a workbook or a book
Yeah.
that you're following as the teaching mechanism. So franchisors, if I put them in every franchisor in a stadium and said, tell me who followed the system the best, they would probably say military veterans, without even thinking through the fact of what you just said is like, you've taught through systems. Like, you are a system person.
And I think the extra advantage of a teacher is we have the emotional component that is also very key, especially in the salon world. So locally, we have a golden rule type of a business mentality that we treat every stylist that we work with as if they're our daughters, our mothers, our sons. And I think that's really helpful. That connecting with the person is very important to us.
As odd as this question is going to sound, but you're at a cocktail party. Do you identify as entrepreneur, or do you identify as a teacher?
I'd say up until I retired, probably more teacher. And then now probably retired, although I was used to working 2 to 3 jobs for so long. Now I call myself semi-retired, but that's absolutely not the case. I still work.
Did your family think you were crazy doing this? I mean, obviously they've seen the ride that you've gone on. I mean, to be a multi-unit operator is already a tremendous level of success. So in the category of franchising, but did they get what you were doing, and did they understand at some point?
I think my mom thought I was absolute batshit crazy. My dad I think he had kind of that entrepreneurial spirit, whether he could do it or not. And he believed in me. So at one point in time, we, for like store number 2, we borrowed some money. We had exhausted our equity, so then we had to go borrow from my parents for our part of the equity. So we did it again. So especially if you're going to borrow money from your parents, then that's a challenge. But I think for the longest time we didn't even tell anybody what we were doing. We kind of kept it on the down low. And then once we opened, I think our first store we opened was like 80% occupied before we opened our doors. And so, we were full. We were past break even and full. And our second store, I think we opened up 95% occupied. Third store, kind of 95. It doesn't work that way now, but we kind of hit it out of the concept was so popular. Everybody that walked in said, why haven't anybody done this before?
You talked about the guy that you had in the class, and you could look at table turns and square footage and everything and construct this. I would imagine now at this point with eight locations, you have a lot of predictability that goes in the model. Obviously, there's rising costs in construction,
Yes.
but
But even that's predictable.
Yeah.
We've worked with the same construction crew after our first store. They've built all of our stores since then. So they have a good idea of that. We have a very, very sophisticated model. So in a $1.47 million build, we can predict it probably within $25,000.
I mean, that's great. Does that prevent you from going into another brand? I mean, because you have that you've
I've never
franchised the franchise.
I've never considered another brand, not even close. In fact, I was talking with someone who has gotten out and asked him what they're doing. He said, I haven't found anything that will come close to the success of Sola. So he hasn't invested on anything yet. So
it's a huge statement. So where does the dream go now? Are you still dreaming?
I think, I'm getting older. And so I don't think I'm quite looking at the exit yet, but probably build one more. One of my partners, I think, would like to continue to build. So I might transition more kind of consultant. I think what they want me to do is help on the site selection, build the models, get it up and running, and then kind of pass it off.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's, completely offline or that's still a partnership, or I don't know. But how old are you, Nick?
44.
Oh, you've got some time. So when you hit about 55 or so, words start not coming to you, and cognitively, I feel like I'm slipping a little bit. Might be I just sent one of my daughters to college a couple days ago. So I don't know, maybe that's affecting me, but I don't quite have the vigor that I did maybe 5-10 years ago. So the idea and we're a very lean company. So 8 Solas, I've got one full-time manager, one part-time manager, and, a couple 1099 guys, and that's it. So we are very streamlined. I probably need to hire another manager. So
well, I think there's an important thing that you just said there. Ultimately, and this is one of the advantages of a franchise, is when you're building up your portfolio under a brand, there is something that is exitable, and obviously you're going through life processing and at various stages, daughter off to college, like you're mentally you're processing what's going on, but knowing that you've built up a tremendous asset that at some point you can say, I'm ready to do something else, and you can hand it off, and there's value in everything that you created. I think that's the other beauty of franchising is the asset at the end. And frankly, I don't think franchise companies celebrate the resale or the exit enough. I think that is selling franchises is one thing, but exiting means you did something right, and you really did right by that franchisee, in my opinion. So it's cool that
I agree. And the advantage right now is the construction costs have come up so much that your value of building it, 5 to 10 years ago, when the construction costs are a lot lower, there's a major bonus there for people if you're looking to sell. So it sometimes can be cheaper to buy an existing store and it's proven, successful. So,
well, look, I love all conversations with franchisees. I think franchisees are rock stars, and I've loved it. I've been doing this for 20 years, so it's not like this is my first time talking with a franchisee. But I've loved all the stories. But I will say this is the first time that you've tweaked my brain of thinking that, like, franchisors are chasing business professionals, and maybe it's because the perception of availability of capital to invest.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm thinking, like, part of my brain right now is processing, like, the educator has all of the things. Maybe we've missed that as an industry this whole time.
Well, it's really funny. I think I read it on some Dave Ramsey article that top 5 income or net worth people, like in the top 5, is teachers, which doesn't really make sense. I always joke that it's because they marry the engineer, um, but there are people that definitely have the means to pursue this. So
That's really cool. Well, look, Pete, I'm grateful for the time that you gave me. This has been great. Lots to think about, and I look forward to seeing where the story goes for you in the future too.
oh, thanks. Check in anytime.
I love it. For Pete, I'm Nick. Another episode of Meet the Z.